So we're going to jump into the 100-foot defensible space and beyond. So what is defensible space? It's clearing flammable vegetation around 30-foot perimeter of your house, and that's what we call Zone 1. So that's where we want to get all that fuel down to the ground as much as we can with no chance of being able to burn. So it gives your home that 30-foot ring or 30-foot buffer all the way around where nothing's going to impact it with fire. The next zone is reducing the flammable fuels from 30 feet out to a minimum of 100 feet, or Zone 2. The clearance beyond 100 feet depends on the slope and the vegetation, which we're going to cover here in a minute as well. And then there's cleaning roofs, gutters, remove dead limbs and trees and over structures, and removing tree limbs within 10 feet of chimneys. And those are things that are really easy to do. I know they're difficult to do for some of us to get up on a ladder and try to clean out the gutters, and I understand that, but we have to think of it in this point. It just takes one ember to get into those gutters, to get into the pine needles or the leaves that are in our gutters, and then it starts to get underneath the roof and underneath the eaves, and now our house is on fire. So it's very important to get those roofs cleaned off, especially in the channels that go down where all those pine needles accumulate, and hire some young kid or bribe some young kid to come over and blow the roof off for you so you get that stuff off. It's very important. So what is LE 100? Well, it is a California state law, Public Resources Code, which you'll hear probably 4 or 5 or 20 times today, 4291. It mandates the creation of a 100-foot defensible space around the structure and within the state responsibility area. So let me tell you a little bit about what SRA, or state responsibility area, is. We have basically 3 zones that we live in. There's the LRA, which is the city boundary to really make this simple. Then in between, then you have the forest that's up in the United States Forest Service. Well, everything in between the cities and the forest, that's us. That's the state responsibility area. And that's what CALFIRE's responsibility is, to protect private, public-owned land. And all such structures are subject to periodic inspections. And that's one thing that gets misconstrued with a lot of people, is periodic inspections. We would love to have 100% compliance and go to every structure, every year, every time. The reality is, we just don't have enough people. So it's like driving down the highway, you expect everybody to be driving the speed limit, and you have that one guy who just wants to pass you, and gets past you and is causing havoc. You're like, well, where's the CHP? Why doesn't he pull that guy over? Well, it's the same thing for us. We just don't have enough people to be out there to cite everybody every time. But that doesn't mean we aren't trying. That doesn't mean we aren't out there. I'll tell you a little bit about my program in a few minutes, about what we were able to do this year versus last year and years prior. Non-compliance may result in a citation or fee, and we're actively pursuing those this year. So if you get a first inspection, 3 weeks later you get a second inspection, 3 weeks later you get a third inspection, and there's still nothing done, 0 compliance, it's going to the district attorney's office. You're getting cited and going to the district attorney's office. And those people are now going to be cited, and it carries a little over $900 fine for the first infraction. So it's a heavy penalty. So an excellent further source, there's 2 of them on there. You can go to fire.ca.gov or readyforwildfire.com, or .org, excuse me. And there's a lot of information about defensible space on both of those. And readyforwildfire.org also has our program, our Ready, Set, Go program, and our One Less Spark, One Less Wildfire program. And the Ready, Set, Go, I'd encourage all of you to take a look at, because it gives you checklists about every stage of wildfire, before, when one starts, and like an evacuation. Just reminders of things that we should take, or things that we should have ready with us, or things that we should have in our vehicle in case of an emergency. And so defensible space in LE 100, why do we do this? So in case of a wildfire, to provide safety to firefighters trying to save our home. And this is a huge one for me. I haven't been assigned to an engine for a couple years now, but when I was assigned to an engine, we would pull into a home, and if we felt comfortable, safe, that this person, this homeowner or these homeowners had done the adequate clearance and taken the time to make this place defendable, we're going to stay and do as much as we possibly can to protect that home. If we pull into a place that has no address sign, we don't even know where we are, and it's an overgrown driveway where we're scratching the engine as we're driving through, and we get in there and there's overgrown trees all over the house, there's vegetation all the way up to the house, I can tell you, I'm not going to risk the lives of the kids I have with me to protect a home that they didn't care enough about to fix. So we're going to leave, and that's the reality. We're not going to put our lives in danger to save something that somebody else didn't care about. We're going to move on to the responsible people's homes who did, and we're going to do our best to protect that home. And it also increases the chance that your home will not be destroyed by a possible wildfire. And notice we put to increase the chances, because we do recognize, as we saw in the Courtney fire, unfortunately there were people who did have 100-foot clearance, where you have a fire that started at the bottom of a hill, ran up, increased intensity, as you saw when I showed you the picture when it hit the brush, created BTUs that were just unimaginable, 100 to 200-foot flame lengths. As I came through Road 426, coming onto that fire, there were flames shooting off the top of the pine trees at 100 feet. And the fire went across the road as I'm driving through. And it was an incredible amount of heat. And it was, some of those homes would have had 200-foot clearance, probably still wouldn't have been enough. The fire came up that hill, laid over the top, and just blew across like a blowtorch. Those things, unfortunately, are going to happen. But that doesn't mean we can't do our best to protect ourselves. Because there were many homes in there that did have the 100-foot clearance that did save, that we were able to save. Failure to provide defensible space may result in firefighters being unable to protect their home due to safety reasons. So now we're going to talk about Zone 1. What you should do in Zone 1 is, this is the first 30 feet. Remove all dead vegetation, which is grass, leaves, pine needles, etc., from your yard, roof, and rain gutters. And trim trees and branches and keep them at least 10 feet from other trees, of 6 feet to 15 feet. And what we mean by that is get the fuels off the ground. So you have a tree and they grow all the way to the ground. We need to take those limbs off to at least 6 feet. So if a fire is coming along the ground, it stays on the ground, doesn't climb up into the tree and then move across the tree where it creates even greater intensity fire. Remove dead tree branches above the roof and keep branches 10 feet away from the chimney. Relocate wood piles to Zone 2. And a lot of us in the winter, which I do the same thing, you bring the wood closer to the house, you don't have to go out in the mud and the dirt and all the rain and all the stuff to get the wood. Well, in the winter, that's fine. We're not worried about wildfires much if we have a winter. Now, if you in the summer, you need to take that wood, put it back in the wood pile, away from the house. Because then what that does is it creates a bunch of heat that the embers can get into to ignite your home on fire. Remove or separate flammable plants, especially near windows. Remove flammables around and under decks. That's a big one too. A lot of places have decks around here, and you need to put some screens on the front of those decks and not pile a bunch of plastic or a bunch of flammable material underneath the deck, because that's a place where, and keep it down to bare mineral soil, down to dirt, so no embers can get in there and start the deck on fire. And separate flammable possessions from trees and shrubs. So now we're moving on to Zone 2. I'm sorry, this is really fast. They only gave me 20 minutes, I could talk for about 2 hours on this. Zone 2, this is the area that is 30 feet to 100 feet from the home. And this requires less vegetation removal, but should be void of any ladder fuels, which are those ones where we limb up the tree so that the fire can pass by. And around the trees and heavy accumulation of surface fuels. So we're going to mow the annual grass around to at least 4 inches or less. Create horizontal spacing between shrubs and trees, and I'll have a chart that shows you how to judge that. Create vertical spacing between grass, shrubs, and trees. We have a chart for that as well. And remove flammable ground material. It may be kept if depth is less than 3 inches for erosion control. We don't want bare dirt everywhere around our properties. Obviously, that would create an issue in the winter. But we do want to keep it down as low as we can, 3 inches or 4 inches of height. So this is the spacing chart that I was telling you about. So for brush or shrubs, you want to have two times the spacing. So you have one brush, and you go one more, and then you put your next one. 10 feet between trees. And then as the slope increases, of course, the spacing needs to increase, because what happens is as a fire moves up the hill, it's drying out these fuels above it. So if they were closer, it would just jump from the next one to the next one. So we need to increase that spacing as the slope increases. And so in zone 2, remove all ground fuels and your grass greater than 4 inches in height. So without vertical clearance, the fire jumps from the ground like a ladder fuel. So you have your normal tree that you trimmed up, but then you plant some shrubs under it that are going to be 4 feet high. Well, the fire is going to hit this shrub and then jump into the tree. So what we're wanting is the fire to hit this shrub. They're going to have some convective heat that comes up, but it's not going to be enough to ignite the tree if you have the proper spacing. So this is directly off the LD100 form. Some additional requirements within the 100 feet. Remove and isolate logs and stumps embedded in the soil. Remove all dead and dying brush and trees and branches within 15 feet of the ground. Mow before 10 a.m. This is a big one, mow before 10 a.m. Because after 10 a.m. our humidity starts to drop dramatically and temperature starts to increase. And then after 10 a.m. is when we start to see most of our wildfires happening. So as long as we're doing it from 7 a.m., 6 a.m., depending on how mad your neighbors want, you want to get your neighbors. But 10 a.m., don't do any more trimming or mowing. Some other requirements is clear all flammable materials within 10 feet around and above your propane tanks. This is another big one. And junction fire, we had a few that weren't cleared around, and you could hear explosions going off quite often. There was about 6 of them. And of course, we were really concerned about the suburban propane building that had a 50,000 gallon propane tank. Unfortunately, that didn't blow up. So street address is shown in contrasting visible colors from the road access. This is a huge one, because it's easy to find your place in the daytime. Anybody can find it in the daytime, right? But at night, at 2:30 in the morning, when I just wake up from the engine and I'm still kind of sleepy and I'm trying to find a place, and they gave me the address and there's no address sign visible, it makes it very difficult to find it. So please post that address proudly at the road so that we can see it. Equip your chimney and stovepipe with metal 3/8 by a 1/2-inch screen, the screen that goes around the stove. The pipe, I know we have to clean that often, the creosote gets built up, but if you don't, sparks come out of the chimney and then we can create fire. And some other recommended was clear 10 feet around and 15 feet around your wood piles. Move wood piles as far away from the structures as you can. Clear vegetation 10 feet from the sides and 15 feet from driveways. This is another big one. It's really hard to get into some people's driveways. We need to clear that area out so we get our engines in it. As you notice, our engines are getting smaller and smaller, right? So we can get into tight spaces. No, they're getting monstrous. I mean, they're 10 feet tall, for goodness sakes. They're huge, so we need some room to get in there. Fortunately, they've equipped all of our engines now with pole saws, so that we can cut our way into people's homes. I'm serious, we have 10-foot tall pole saws now. The address sign visible from the access road we talked about, and street signs clearly visible and marked. I mean, that's more the county thing, but if you've noticed that your road doesn't have that, please contact your county officials and have them post those road signs so we can find a place. And here's zone 3, and I got my 5-minute sign like 2 minutes ago, and those 5 minutes were for questions, so I'm really going to go faster because I know some of you probably have some questions. Zone 3 is basically extended out further. So we talked about what you need to do in zone 1, what you need to do in zone 2. We'll do the same thing in zone 3 that we would do in zone 2. Trim up those ladder fuels, mow down if you can, and clean up your property, basically. And so that if a fire is approaching and there's a great intensity fire, it gets to your property, slows down. That's perfect. That's exactly what we're looking for. So that is the end of